We're continuing the Sikha. This is a Hadran from Tavshem Mem Tes on the Rambam. Parshas Vayigash, Tes Tevis, for Shabbos Parshas Vayechi. Okay, so just to recap the point that the Rebbe explained here in Siv Dalet, the Rebbe is discussing the difference between what it says in the Rambam in the end of the Sefer Ayad and Hilchos Malachim, where the Rambam speaks about Leinesav Chachamim, Elli, Moisa Mashiach, that the Chachamim want and desire the Moisa Mashiach, the time when Yidden will be Pnuyim, B'Teireh, B'Chachmas, there'll be nothing else to be busy with, other than sitting and learning Torah. And similar in Hilchos Tshuva, Rambam also talks about the fact that the Nisavo, the Chachamim wanted Yemoisa Mashiach, the Lasik, B'Teireh, Mitzvahs Kahigen. So the point that I've explained is that it's not the same kind of halacha. In Hilchos Tshuva, the Rambam is coming to explain the inyan of Tshuva. And what he's saying is that from this, that you see that La'asad Lavai will be a time when there'll be no disturbance in Torah mitzvahs, that should give you an encouragement and a simcha in the mitzvahs that you do today. When a Yid does a mitzvah today, and he has a difficulty fulfilling the mitzvah, he doesn't hear what the mitzvah is about, he doesn't feel the geschmack in the mitzvah, Sheikh is going to come, you're going to see begoli what the mitzvah does. This is Derech Agav, this is any that Alter Rebbe explains in the Torah of this week's parsha. Alter Rebbe says that Golus is compared to a pregnancy, and Geula is compared to a Leida. What's the teichen of the difference? In both cases, you can have the full body of the baby that's already here and formed. Elamai, in the Ibur, it's just a basar gashmi, and there's no life. There's no life yet. The baby eats from what the mother eats straight from the stomach. It doesn't eat on its own. It doesn't think for itself. There's just gashmis. Once the baby's born, so now it has a nefesh of its own. It becomes independent and a life of its own. So the Alter Rebbe basically says it's the same thing also in Aveda and Ruchnius. When a Yid fulfilled the mitzvah, a Yid saw right away what the point of the mitzvah is all about. He saw what kind of Gili Elokos his mitzvah generated. Zman hazeh, you do a mitzvah, the Alter Rebbe says, we do today mitzvah sanashim ulamada. We don't chapsich what a mitzvah is all about. This is mamish t'sinyan. So the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva is saying that even though you're doing the mitzvah today, and you may do it with a kriros and with a atzlos, but when you know that this mitzvah has a tremendous Gili Elokos in it, and when Mashiach comes, that mitzvah, you'll see this Gili Elokos, it gives a chayis in the mitzvah. There's also a similar word in Nayim Yayim, Benegei Talmud HaTorah. It says Nayim Yayim, when a person learns Torah, and he knows that the very same inyan that he's learning here in this world, you're going to learn in Gan Eden, and the Neshamas learn this same inyan in Gan Eden on a completely different level. The Lashon Nayim Yayim is to get that rein a fire. It lights, it ignites a little fire in your heart when you learn this inyan in Torah.
I don't understand it about that.
Muna pshuta v'yid. That's the inyan of Hilchos Tshuva. In Hilchos Malachim, however, the Rambam is focusing on something else. In Hilchos Malachim, the Rambam is focusing on telling us the obligation. The Rambam is focusing on telling us the obligation we have today to prepare for Mashiach. How even today we have to believe in Mashiach, we have to want Mashiach and be misaveh for Mashiach. It's the exact opposite. In Hilchos Tshuva, the Rambam is talking about using the knowledge about the future to inspire us today. So we're talking about the time of Mashiach all in relation to our reality today. But in Hilchos Malachim, it's actually the opposite. What's telling you is, even while you're living in Golus today, in this Golus reality, however, don't get stuck in the Golus mentality. Don't just think that this is it, this is where we are. No, a Yid has to constantly yearn. I want Mashiach. The Rebbe here, we learned last week a very powerful thing. The Rebbe says, the Rambam says that that the only reason a person wants Mashiach is not for any zaitige reasons, not that they should get rid of tzaris or any other gashmis to get benefits, which will all happen, which are all also a result of the ultimate Gilui Elokos. But a Yid wants Mashiach because he knows that that's the time when the truth of the Eibush is going to be revealed in the world. That's the reason we want Mashiach. Okay, let's continue. Sifei, the Rebbe now will explain and answer the different diyukim that were asked there in the difference of Hilchos Malachim and
much different level than what you can make.
Again.
The Moshiach comes, our awareness of the Abishur will be much different
Mhm.
than it was in the times of the mitzvah. When we did a mitzvah, he said when we did a mitzvah in the times of the mitzvah, we had an awareness of what the
Right.
the Rashtai. I assume that when Moshiach comes,
It's going to be much greater.
much greater.
Yeah, absolutely. That was just a taste. Okay, let's continue. Sifei. Let's look at the differences, how the Rambam describes when Mashiach comes in Hilchas Malachim and Hilchas Tshuva. Hachiluk ben kimala ha'aretz de'es Hashem. Quoting this pasuk of Mala ha'aretz de'es Hashem, the world is filled with the knowledge of Hashem, be'Hilchas Tshuva, v'lekamayim la'yom achasim shemaysiv rak be'Hilchas Melech HaMashiach. And then he adds the words, kamayim la'yom achasim in Hilchas Melech HaMashiach. Ha'teichen da'alachas ha'teirehu. What's the content of all the halachas in Torah? B'lashon Rambam, as the Rambam himself says it, Roiv dinei HaTorah einan elo l'saken adeis u'l'yasher kol ha'maisim. All the dinim in Torah are here to rectify the person, to refine a person, whether your brain, your mind, the way you think, and l'yasher kol ha'maisim, to set a person on a straight path. Hainu shan hagas adam tia al pi ratzon Hashem. What's the straight path for you? That he lives in this world, fulfilling mitzvahs, doing the ratzon of Hashem. The same is also regarding everything else that exists in the world. Halachas of Torah are the Eibish's guidance regarding how we treat everything in the world. Everything in the world should be according to the guidance of Torah, which is ratzon Hashem. That's the teichen of all the halachas of the Torah. It's giving you. Torah is the blueprint of the creation of the world, and Torah is also the blueprint which gives us the kayach to actually be mekayim the whole world with the halachas of Torah and with the ratzon of Hashem. That's the meaning of Torah. Now, what's the most fundamental thing of all the mitzvahs before you come to any individual mitzvah? Yediyas Hashem. You first have to have the knowledge that Hashem exists and that Hashem creates everything in the world. And the Rebbe here is emphasizing not only the belief in Hashem, but the idea, real knowledge, to know. As the Rambam says in the beginning of the Sefer, Hashem, Leida, Sheyesh, Sham, Motzicholu, to know that Hashem exists. This is the pillar of all foundations, and this is the foundation of all foundations, the pillar of all wisdoms. This is the root of everything. If the knowledge of Hashem, if our awareness and our recognition of Hashem here is here in our minds and heart and in the entire world, so then the automatic result is that everything is going to follow the ratzon of Hashem. So each mitzvah is a prat. It's a prat of an inyan klali, and the inyan klali of here is that everything should be in sync with the Eibishter, with the Lekos, with the Ratzon Hashem, which is in the world. This idea that a person should be recognizing and aware of Hashem. So there's many levels to this. To what extent this knowledge of Hashem penetrates the person and affects the person in the world, there could be many, many different levels to this. Okay. Now, before you turn the page, let's just see what it says in Order 21. I mean, obviously, for anybody that learned Chassidus, this is very obvious, where you see Chassidus has layers upon layers and levels of his beinunus, a level of awareness of the Eibishter on one level, another level higher, deeper and stronger. It's endless, different Hespedim and things that Chassidus says about Yediyas Hashem. Here, the Rebbe Pashto brings Bepashtos al Pi Nigla when it comes to the concept of Yediyah, knowledge, that there's different levels to this. Yeah, it's a very interesting ha'ara. Even for someone that does not learn any of the levels that Chassidus speaks about, Pashat al Pi Nigla, you see the union of Yediyah, there are various different levels to this. Look on Order 21. So you see it, yeah? Sharei yitochen gam, there's a possibility, Sha'idiyah any pelas al adam kolkach. Person could know of something, but it doesn't necessarily have any impact on who you are and your behavior. This could be actually to a very strong extreme. But limited by the lashon that it's always brought about. It says it about Nimrod. It's brought about Amalek, that he knows his creator, but he still rebels. It's a real knowledge. Taita is saying that he knows, not someone else. So if Taita says so, then it's real. it doesn't have an impact on him that he should change and he should actually follow the Ratzon of the Eibishter. Not only is Eiv b'sheigig, sha'af hum is gabrus sarah. Even when a Yid does an Aveda b'sheigig, that also comes from a certain Ra in him that is intense, and therefore it comes out in this Aveda b'sheigig. Elegam b'mezid. It's even the mamish b'mezid with the kavana v'achem eskaven limited by. So here you see that the Rebbe is bringing the example of the extreme, where a person can have knowledge about something, but it doesn't move you, doesn't change you. So what we're talking about over here is a idea of the Eibishter that lifts you, that changes you, that impacts your whole behavior. That's the kind of idea that has to penetrate the person, like from the pasuk, to take it to heart, that should actually click in the person's life. It should actually connect you. It says in Chassidus, right? The word idea also means Adam Yoda as Chava, which means the union of connection. It's not some information, knowledge. Okay, here it's interesting how that Rebbe brings all this here, this whole arichas here regarding Yediyah. Look in the Shuli Agilyan on the bottom of the page regarding a Sheigig. Even when a person does something b'Sheigig, there are various different Ifanim of Sheigig. L'har Mishnei Ifanim b'Sheigig. There are two ways that a person can be doing an Aveda b'Sheigig. One is Shetah b'Yediyah Metzias, or Shetah b'Yediyah Sadin. Let's say, for example, a person does a malacha on Shabbos because he made a mistake, he thought it's Sunday. Didn't realize it's Shabbos, that's one thing. Or it could be another thing. A person does a malacha on Shabbos b'sheigig because he didn't know that the action he's doing is aser. He didn't know that this is a malacha. He didn't realize that this is baiter. He thought that what he's doing is not baiter. He's missing the information of the din. It's a different kind of sheigig. There's a difference in these two levels of sheigig when it comes to a ben noyach. By a guy, if it's a mistake in the fact that he doesn't know a certain detail of a halacha, it's not called a shgaga. That's called a mezid. Why? What do you mean you're a shaygig, you don't know the halacha? That's his responsibility. Part of the obligation of Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach is to learn and to know all the halachas. If he doesn't know, that's something that is his blame. It's not a shaygig. That's what the Rambam says.
Ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Ignorance of the law is not an excuse, right? If you're driving a car and you say, I didn't know the law, that's never an excuse or anything else like that. There's no such a thing. Exactly. Okay. Ilchas Malachim. Yeah, here it says that but by a Yid though, if a Yid does a malacha on Shabbos because of a lack of information, it is called a shaygig. You bring your carbon chatas for that. Yeah. Okay. The Pasuk Kerave, the Rambam brings this. We pass like Rave. She'oimim mutter. This is actually interesting. This is Shiur Rambam. Shiur Rambam. I think it's today's Shiur Rambam as well in Gimel Prakim in Hilchas Reitzech Shmiras Nefesh. It's brought to Mamish Desinyan. She'oimim mutter karav lemeizedu. That if a person kills someone b'sheigig and he says, "Oh, I thought it's mutter. I didn't know the halacha." So in such a case, it's karav lemezid. And by a guy, it's mamish a mezid, and he's chayiv the punishment just like the mezid mamish, because he should have learned. Okay, this is a little bit of a side Indian, but it's interesting that Rabbi here brings this in connection to the concept of yidiyah. Okay, let's continue the next page. It's a good question. What's the sibbe? What's the reason for the distinction? Maybe it's based on the fact that a yid has that you should be more machmer with a yid than a guy. Okay, a yid has a neshama, a yid is not sure. Okay. Page 150. You got it? Turn over the page. It's upside down. Sorry. The next page, 150. Okay, so there's various levels of yidiyah. Now, when's the deepest level of awareness and recognition of the Eibush going to be? B'yemais Mashiach. When Mashiach comes. She'az tiyah yidiyas Hashem ba'ifin shetachder kol metzias adam v'olam kula. Knowledge of Hashem will fully penetrate the entity of the person and the world. Mala ha'aretz deis Hashem. Mala means filled. Sha'aretz tiyah kula meleya. Shaloi tishar nekuda achash lo tiyah meleya b'deis Hashem. The idea of filled does not only mean like the way we measure something which is filled physically, fill a cup with water and it's filled to the brim and it overflows. Filled in the spiritual sense means is in ganzen durchgenommen, durchgezapt, like every fiber of the person's being senses the Eibishter in himself. It's mamish durich and durich. That's the concept of mala. But there are still two levels to this. One is when it says mala haaretz deis Hashem. So that's already a very powerful thing when there's no part of him that doesn't have the Eibishter, but then it's a Kamayim L'Yom Chasim. When you're covered with water, like the water that covers the ocean. What's the difference? The difference between these two expressions, when something is full or when something is covered, is when you have a cup or anything that gets filled with a certain content, the vessel that contains the water that it's filled with remains in its form that it had before. When something gets completely covered, if you have a cup that's submerged inside the water, it could be submerged to the point that you don't even see it at all. You just see water. You don't see anything besides the water. In other words, what this means is, when something is full, you're not changing what it is. It's in existence, and it has its properties and whatever its nature. You're just filling it with a deeper content of something. But covering means that you're transforming it. You're completely elevating it, or you're nullifying the entire vessel. Those are the two levels that the Rambam is speaking about regarding Lasad Lavai. So Benitten the Don over here as well. When the pasuk says Mala, the world will be filled. Pirushi, what this means is Shaha'aretz Nisheres Metzias Latzma. The Aretz, the world here, remains still in its form of what it was. So therefore, as a result, even when the knowledge of Hashem is filled in every part of the world, there's no point left out. But since the world still remains a Metzias, it's just it contains in it, and it has in it the knowledge of Hashem, but it's not, the knowledge of Hashem is not to the point that it overwhelms the world completely. Yeshev Shadas, still is a possibility. There's even an actual possibility that the world should do something or behave, the nature of the world should behave in a manner that's not in sync with what the Eibishter wants. Because the world remains in its form and in its nature. By contrast, when the Rambam then adds the words Kamayim L'Yom Chasim, which means it's covered and completely nullified. L'Deyas Hashem, with the knowledge of Hashem, the Dugmas, Karkes Hayam, like the bed of the sea, that's completely covered and nullified in the water. You look at the water, you don't look at it and say, oh, this is dry land. But it's dry land that goes very deep down, and it's covered with water. You don't look at it that way. This is water. That's all that's here. So what is this? What is this hinting to? This is Kamashikasav Rambam. Taylor Lagamri. Yeah, Kamashikasav Rambam Lufnei Shamayim Reimus Lamei Das. Rambam already mentions in Hilchis Mikvois that water also means the Mei Das, the water of knowledge of Hashem. So when the world is filled with the knowledge of Hashem to this extent that it completely covers the world, it overwhelms, it's mevatel the whole world. So then Hashem. There's no possibility for anything in the world to do opposite of what the Eibishter wants. Because then it's so overwhelmed and so involved that you don't see this. There's nothing other than the Deis Hashem. That is the addition of Mala Ha'aretz Deis Hashem Kamayim Layom Machasem. In the end of the Sefer, the Rambam adds after those words of Kamayim Layom Machasem. Oh, now that Rebbe brings this in, that we find this is not Stam Avart, but you see this also in a Mishnah and a Halacha B'Negeyat the Hilchas Mikvais. The Yom Tak Yoser, this is even better, Geschmacker understood. Maybe because of Adugma the Kamayim Layom Machasem, he brings that the world will be covered with water. But what example is used of water? Example of a yam, of the ocean. Yam dafke, so we're talking about the water, v'loy dogim shabiyam. So that means only the water and not the fish that are inside the water. So L'chayre Rebbe explains as follows: Dogim shabiyam, the fish that are inside the water, in meyais, shekol chiyusam hi meyayam. Fish are covered inside the water and they have no life without water. B'lashon Chazal, the famous mashal that the Gemara says that Kivin sha'elim liyabasha miyad mesim, the fish, as soon as they come out of the water, they die. That's the mashal for Teira, that a yid can't live for a moment without Teira. And so much so, here's a Mishnah that says sheyesh deya. There's an opinion that says Shekol shu mibriyas hayam ein chaytzitz. That if you're toveling in the water, and in the water, there's also fish that are swimming around, they don't create a chatzitze for the tefillah. Why? Because the fish are like part and parcel of the water. That's one opinion. This is the opinion of Rab Shimon. Shekol shahu mibriyas hayam ein chaytzitz. V'kiv shemitziyusai he meyayam, because the fish is like part of the water. Okay, so and the Rebbe used to spoke about this example many, many times to make the point that sometimes even when you see a certain mitzias, but if the mitzias is bottled to another mitzias that it's totally enveloped on and independent on, it has no gather of mitzias b'chlal al pitayre. And the example for this is this opinion, this thing of Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon said, fish in the water is like water. It's literally like water. At kedei kach. For a mikveh, you need water. And a fish is a chatzitza, but it's not a chatzitza. If you're toveling and the fish is on you, it's part of the water, it's not a chatzitza b'chlal. But nevertheless, here the Rebbe goes a step deeper. Kivin shemitziyusai, sorry, harei, that's it. One way to say harei, but nevertheless, we physically see shadagim yechaylam lichyais meshach zman b'chutz l'mayim. The fact is, though, even though fish can't survive for too long outside the water, but they could live for quite a while outside the water, and then you throw them back in the water, it'll live. So the very fact that it could live out of the water, it shows that soft, it is episomitzias. And the Rebbe here says the details about this. You have fish that jump out of the water for a while, or for a short while. Fish that were captured for a while, and then they're returned into the water, they live. The Mishnah says about this. The fish, from what point are they mekabel tumah? Because the chazman shein chayin ain't a mekabel tumah. As long as the fish are alive, they're not susceptible to tumah. As long as they're out of the water and they could still live, so then they're not going to be mekabel tumah. So the Bartanura says, if you return them to the water and they could live. So we see clearly in a Mishnah and a halacha this concept. There is a certain time that fish could live out of the water after they were captured. You return them to the water and they live. The Tamadavar, and what does this show you? The fish, as bottle as they are to the water, but soft, it's not water itself. Okay? If your wife is going to serve you water on Shabbos, and she's going to say, "Oh, this is fish, water, fish. It's the same thing." You're going to look at a water, fish. It's the same. What do you mean? It says the Mishnah. If she's a lamdanis, she'll tell you so fish and water is the same thing. The fish So it's the mitzias, the muchish. So here the Rebbe is talking about the singing when you get to the actual even life of the fish. A fish could live out of the water for a certain while. Correct. So on one hand, it's very much part and parcel of the water, but on the other hand, not mamish water. It's not mamish water. But the actual water itself, it's just a place that's for water. It's an open place where the water is contained in it, and that's it. You don't, and actually, once the water is there, you don't divide it into two different things. You don't say, there's a big pool here, a big opening, a karka, and in the karka there's water. Once the water is there, it's an ocean. That's what it is. Okay, let's just finish the Indian of it. This is what the pasuk is saying, that the world will be filled with Hashem like Kamayim Liyom Achasim Legabe Malaret Zeis Hashem. Malaret Zeis Hashem Pirushai Sheyeshna Mitzias Haaretz. There is an existence of an Aretz. Haaretz Meleya Deis Hashem, but it's filled with the knowledge. It could still be a Mitzias for itself. And this is understood even more than the fish. The Aretz Hagashmis is for sure more of a Mitzias than the fish that, to a large extent, are bottled to the water. It's very much dependent on the water, but they're still a Mitzias for themselves. This is a revelation which is so great and so overwhelming that you see nothing other than this. Me'adas, the water of knowledge of Hashem. Kikol mitzias hayam eina ela makim hamayim. It's a place designated for water, nothing else. Makim v'kelu l'deis Hashem. That's what the whole entire world becomes. It becomes a place made for the revelation of the Eibishter. That's the revelation that happens when Mashiach comes. Huh? That's the ultimate level of Yediyah. Yeah. When you look at the world, instead of seeing a world from Metzias, the whole entire world is lachatchila, just a keli for the Eibishter to be revealed in it. That's what the whole Metzias of the world consists of. That's the ultimate revelation when Mashiach comes. Okay, the Rebbe goes deeper and deeper here in the Sikha. It goes higher and higher, as we'll see in Mitzvah Hashem.